he didn't go out and selectively target members to be killed. Though there might be instances, and as I said, just take this with a grain of salt, right? There might be instances where there are acts of mass murder where targeting is present. For the most part, when we're talking about mass murder in a very general sense, it's indiscriminate, right? It might be indiscriminate. Okay. Even if, and I can even think of like, you'll hear a lot of like homicide, suicide cases where family members kill other members of the family. I'm targeting everyone. Granted, I'm targeting everyone in the house. So someone might argue that on that sense there is a sense of targeting, but you know, it's open to debate. Some may say yes, some may say no. I think it's a little bit of both. I'm just gonna, well, actually, let's just do it. Yes or no? It depends. And most of these, it sort of depends, but clearly, war crimes, ethnic cleansing, crimes against humanity, genocide, for sure. Okay, the intent to destroy in whole or in part, right? This intent to destroy. Well, obviously, there's no intent in crimes against humanity. That was one of the reasons that we saw crime against humanity was different from an act of genocide. The comparison was, think of the relationship between murder and premeditated murder, right? There's obviously this intent to destroy in genocide, right? In war crimes, there is no intent to destroy, right? The destruction isn't necessarily a part of war crimes. So, because the example that I just gave of mass rape is a good example. Now, this is something that I would defend an argument if I had to. The distinction between genocide and crime against humanity is that there isn't the intent to destroy in, and not crime against humanity, sorry. The distinction between genocide and ethnic cleansing is that in an act of ethnic cleansing, you can achieve, right? You can achieve the desired goal of sort of purgation, right? Purging, to purge or to cleanse, right? You can achieve the advantage of purging without killing, right? Without this intent to destroy. You don't necessarily need an intent to destroy, I would argue, in an act of ethnic cleansing, whereas in an act of genocide, you do need the intent to destroy. And I think that's one of the fundamental distinctions between ethnic cleansing and genocide, and why I would not label all acts of genocide as acts of ethnic cleansing. I think it's dangerous to do so, but I'm not going to get into that discussion right now. So I would say no. And then obviously, in mass murder, there isn't this intent to destroy in whole or in part, right? In acts of mass murder, sometimes the murderer won't even know whether or not he or she was successful in the act of murder. In acts of mass murder, it might not be the case that the intent is to destroy. It might be the intent to destroy, as I said in the example of like killing family members, right? There might be some intent in killing everybody in the house, but that is obviously not comparable with the idea of killing everybody of, you know, ethnicity X. Though there is a similarity insofar as the intent was to sort of kill as many people as possible. The specific focus, right, how that intent was localized is completely different, and I'm not going to get into that now. So that the only one that really exhibits this intent to destroy is the act of genocide. And as I said, take this with a grain of salt. Okay, the next, the action requires collective organization, right? Does it take group effort to have these things occur, right? Is group effort requisite? Is it necessary, right? Is the presence of group effort sort of necessary in order to get this to one of these five concepts to manifest? Well, let's look. Well, crimes against humanity, do we need group effort in order for it to manifest? Well, yeah, right. You do need group effort in order to discuss crimes against humanity, right? A crime against humanity and there might be some debate between this, but for the most part, crimes against humanity are orchestrated, right? It requires some strategic planning to commit a crime against humanity, right? It's not your average, everyday mass murder that is classified as a crime against humanity. Obviously, a crime against humanity and mass murder isn't the same, right? So we need to have some type of strategic planning, a strategic insight into how we're going to kill this group or oppress this group or subjugate this group, torture this group, and so on. And yes, it does require organization. Genocide. Does genocide require organization? I don't think there's any debate among genocide scholars. I may have read maybe one scholar, maybe, but I think all genocide scholars agree that an act of genocide cannot be committed by an individual, right? Individuals do not commit acts of genocide. It's impossible. An individual can't take up a rifle, even in the most delusional state, and say that I am going to go out and kill all of individuals representing ethnicity X, sort of at will. That's not a condition for genocide. It would definitely be a condition for mass murder. It might be even a condition for serial murder or serial mass murder, but it wouldn't be a condition for genocide, right? So that in sort of describing this, if you will, taxonomy of murder, this is the only way to really put it, it's important to make sure that you make the distinctions between sort of genocide and the rest, right? In an act of genocide, like an act of crime against humanity, there is strategic planning, and this strategic planning requires sort of group effort, right? A collective, organized effort. Individual human beings don't commit acts of genocide, and so on. So, yes, it does. Next, war crimes. Do war crimes require collective action? Well, no, war crimes do not require collective action. I, as an individual, can be, and is very likely, and has happened quite often, be accused of committing a war crime, right? Individuals are committed of committing war crimes. It's less likely, though not entirely unlikely, but it's less likely to have an individual committed, sort of prosecuted for crimes against humanity. Usually it's a collective or group of individuals under some sort of order or directive from some external force that we have the attribution of crime against humanity. War crime, however, an individual can be committed of a war crime. I can walk into a village by myself, selectively target, all the young men to murder, and proceed to murder non-combatants, so that it doesn't require any sort of strategic planning per se. It doesn't require any collective or group effort. I, as sort of a free, standing individual, technically the lone wolf, can go out and commit war crimes on his or her own. Ethnic cleansing. Does ethnic cleansing require organized, sort of systematized organization? Yeah, it does, right? The whole idea of targeting an entire ethnic group, right? The idea that an ethnic group is going to be targeted, and this ethnic group is going to be systematically exterminated or purged, or a combination of exterminated and purged, is not something that one person cooks up by him or herself and implements by him or herself, right? It requires organized, structured, very deliberate and systematic planning in order to pull off an ethnic cleansing, which obviously is the same for genocide. And then finally, mass murder. Well, that's sort of obvious, right? No, mass murder does not require, in no sense does mass murder require organized, collective organization, right? An individual, and typically it's the case that, well, I can't say typically, I really don't know the stats, but I would assume that overwhelmingly individuals commit acts of mass murder. Obviously, governments commit acts of mass murder, and so on, which are to be differentiated from acts of genocide, but individuals commit acts of mass murder.